8-year-old black boy stuns judge with his legal intelligence. The entire jury is shocked. The heavy wooden doors of the Chicago courtroom swung open with a creak that echoed through the tense air, admitting a rush of hallway chatter before sealing shut again, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of papers to fill the silence as the trial of Elijah Thompson unfolded under the stern gaze of Judge Amelia Hargrove, a no-nonsense veteran of the bench known for her sharp rulings and even sharper intolerance for theatrics. But nothing could have prepared her, or the packed gallery, for the moment when Jamal Thompson, an 8-year-old black boy with wide eyes framed by thick glasses and a neatly pressed shirt that hung loosely on his small frame, rose from his seat in the front row beside his ailing grandfather, clutching a worn backpack stuffed with notebooks and printouts that represented months of secret toil, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a clear bell as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, may I please speak in defense of my grandfather? I have evidence that proves he's innocent." The words hanging in the air with a gravity that belied his age, drawing gasps from the jury box, where 12 faces, a mix of skepticism, amusement, and faint curiosity, turned toward him, while prosecutor Elena Vasquez, a formidable attorney in her mid-40s, with a reputation for dismantling defenses like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, shot up from her table, with a scoff her tailored suit, impeccable as she objected vehemently. "This is absurd, Your Honor." A child has no place interrupting proceedings. This is a courtroom, not a playground. Her tone dripping with condescension that masked a flicker of unease at the unexpected interruption. But Judge Hargrove, leaning forward over her elevated desk, with furrowed brows beneath her salt-and-pepper hair, held up a hand to silence the prosecutor, her curiosity piqued by the boy's poised demeanor, despite the tremor in his small hands. "Young man, state your name for the record, and explain why you believe you should address this court," she said, her voice firm, yet laced with a paternal note that suggested she was humoring him for the moment, though deep down she sensed something extraordinary in his steady gaze, and Jamal, swallowing hard but standing taller, replied, "My name is Jamal Thompson, Sir Ma'am, Your Honor, and my grandfather Elijah Thompson is accused of stealing $20,000 from the South Side Community Center Fund he managed for 20 years, but he didn't do it. I've been studying the case, and I can show you proof." The courtroom buzzing now with whispers as spectators craned their necks, some shaking their heads in disbelief at the sight of this pint-sized advocate, Elijah himself, a weathered 75-year-old with silver hair and calloused hands from decades of community work, reaching out to gently tug at Jamal's sleeve, with tears welling in his eyes, whispering, "Boy, you don't have to do this. Let the system handle it." But Jamal shook his head resolutely, his mind flashing back to the night it all began 2 years prior, when a raging fire claimed his parents' lives in their modest apartment. The flames that started from a faulty heater, devouring everything, including his sense of security, leaving him orphaned and haunted by survivor's guilt because he had begged them to stay home that evening instead of attending a neighborhood meeting. And it was Elijah who took him in. The grandfather who had always been a pillar in the community, running the center that provided after-school programs, food drives, and job training for families like theirs, sitting with Jamal through sleepless nights, reading aloud from old legal books borrowed from the local library to distract him from nightmares explaining concepts like burden of proof and reasonable doubt in simple terms that sparked a fire in the boy's curious mind, turning grief into a quest for understanding how the world could be so unfair yet navigable through knowledge. And as Jamal grew fascinated, he began sneaking to the library after school, poring over case files and online tutorials on a battered computer, his grandfather encouraging him with stories of civil rights, leaders who used the law as a shield against injustice, saying, "Knowledge is the key, Jamal. It unlocks doors that hatred tries to slam shut." Words that echoed now as Jamal faced the judge, pulling out his first piece of evidence, a stack of mismatched receipts photocopied from the center's records, explaining in a clear voice, "Look here, Your Honor. The prosecution says Grandpa withdrew $5,000 for building repairs on a day when he was at the doctor's office with me for my checkup. I have the medical receipt stamped with the time, and it matches the bank's transaction log exactly." The jury leaning in as one member, a middle-aged woman with a notepad, jotted furiously, while another, an older man, adjusted his glasses in surprise. Prosecutor Vasquez interrupting with a sharp laugh. "This is preposterous. How could an 8-year-old possibly understand financial logs? He's clearly been coached, and this stunt is wasting the court's time." Her words laced with a subtle bias that didn't escape the notice of those in the gallery who had faced similar dismissals, but Jamal, undeterred, countered politely, "Ma'am, I learned about timestamps from a book on forensic accounting at the library. It's public knowledge, and anyone can check it if they bother to look." His response drawing a murmur of approval from the back, where community members who knew Elijah's selfless work nodded in agreement, Judge Hargrove rapping her gavel lightly to restore order, her initial amusement fading into genuine interest as she allowed Jamal to continue. "Proceed, but keep it brief and factual," she instructed. And Jamal nodded, delving deeper into his backpack for a timeline he had drawn himself on graph paper. Colorful lines connecting dates and events with arrows pointing to discrepancies, explaining how the funds vanished in small increments disguised as vendor payments to companies that didn't exist. I called the numbers listed on the invoices "Your Honor," and they all led to deadlines or wrong addresses. Grandpa would never pay fake companies. He taught me. Honesty is the foundation of trust. His voice cracking slightly as memories flooded back of Elijah helping neighbors file for aid, organizing fundraisers, and always refusing payment for his efforts. The man who had turned the community center into a beacon for black families in a neighborhood plagued by gentrification and neglect, but now accused because an anonymous tip pointed fingers at him without proof, the prosecution relying on his role as fund manager to imply guilt, and as Jamal presented a photo from his phone showing Elijah at a church event during one withdrawal time. The jury's expressions shifted from doubt to intrigue. One juror whispering to another, "The kid's making sense. Why wasn't this checked?" While Vasquez paced her confidence waning as she realized this wasn't the slam-dunk case, she had prepared her own biases, perhaps blinding her to thorough investigation, and Jamal, sensing the momentum, pulled out a key document, a bank statement with highlighted anomalies, building to the cliffhanger, where he said, "And this proves not just innocence, but who might really be behind it." The courtroom hanging on his every word, the air thick with anticipation, as the boy's bold interruption transformed a routine trial into a spectacle of youthful brilliance against entrenched power. His traumatic past fueling a determination that no one could have anticipated, flashbacks weaving through his mind of nights huddled with Elijah over faded law texts, the grandfather's voice steady as he read about landmark cases where the underdog prevailed, instilling in Jamal the belief that justice isn't given, it's demanded with facts and heart, a lesson born from their shared loss when the fire took his parents, Elijah pulling him from the smoke-filled ruins and vowing to rebuild their lives brick by brick, teaching him to channel pain into purpose, and now, in this wood-paneled room smelling of polished oak and old paper, Jamal embodied that purpose. his small hands gesturing emphatically as he detailed how the embezzlement pattern matched unrelated fraud cases in the city, ones the prosecutor had dismissed too quickly. "See, the signatures on these checks don't match Grandpa's handwriting. I compared them to his old letters, and the pressure marks are different, like someone was trying too hard to copy drawing from a library book on document forgery he had devoured in secret." The jury, now fully engaged, some nodding as the pieces clicked. Vasquez objecting again, but her voice lacking its earlier bite. "This is hearsay from a minor. It shouldn't be allowed." But Judge Hargrove overruled, "Let the boy speak. He's providing context that the prosecution seems to have overlooked." Her tone sharpening as she glanced at Vasquez, hinting at growing impatience with the case's weaknesses, and Jamal pressed on, recounting how Elijah's community work had made enemies among developers eyeing the center's land for luxury condos, suggesting motive beyond mere theft. "Grandpa fought to keep the center open for kids like me, teaching us chess and math after school, but some people wanted it gone." His words painting a vivid picture of Elijah as a hero, not a criminal. The grandfather who had raised him on stories of ancestors who overcame slavery through sheer will. They didn't have lawyers back then, but they had truth, and truth won. Elijah had said words Jamal now lived by as he faced down the court, the gallery whispering in support, a few community elders dabbing eyes at the boy's poise, and as he approached the bench with his final piece for this moment, a witness list with notes on coerced testimonies the chapter built to its peak. Jamal declaring, "This isn't just about money. It's about who gets to tell the story of our neighborhood," leaving the room on the edge. The judge's gavel poised, Vasquez fuming, and the jury shocked into rapt attention. The bold interruption, not just a child's plea, but the spark of a revelation that would unravel everything. Jamal's perseverance, a testament to the unbreakable bond with his grandfather forged in fire, and fortified by knowledge ready to challenge the system that had underestimated them both. As the echoes of Jamal's initial revelations faded in the Chicago courtroom, leaving a palpable tension that thickened the air like a gathering storm, Prosecutor Elena Vasquez regained her composure with a steely glare directed at the boy who had dared to upend her meticulously crafted case, her voice slicing through the murmurs as she launched her counteroffensive. "Your Honor, this child's so-called evidence is nothing more than hearsay and amateur sleuthing. I move to strike his statements from the record and admonish the defense for this blatant manipulation." Her words calculated to reclaim authority, portraying Jamal as a puppet rather than a prodigy, but Judge Amelia Hargrove, her expression now a mask of measured intrigue. After the boy's compelling alibi proofs denied the motion with a firm shake of her head. "Overruled, Counselor. The minor has presented verifiable documents that warrant further exploration. Proceed with caution." "Young man, but you may continue under oath as a witness." Her ruling sending a ripple of whispers through the jury, where faces that had been amused now bore traces of doubt toward the prosecution's narrative, and Jamal swearing in with a small hand on the Bible that felt disproportionately heavy dove into the heart of his strategy. Cross-examining the first witness, a former center volunteer named Carla Reyes, who had testified under Vasquez's questioning that Elijah seemed suspiciously secretive about finances, but Jamal drawing from lessons in interrogation techniques he had absorbed during after-hours sessions at the community center with his mentor, Mr. Harold Jenkins, a retired attorney who volunteered to teach mock trials to kids as a way to give back after his own battles with wrongful accusations decades ago, asked pointedly, "Ms. Reyes, you said Grandpa was secretive, but didn't he share the budget reports openly at every monthly meeting, including the one where you suggested buying new computers for the kids' lab?" the question catching her off guard, as she stammered, "Well, yes, but—" He didn't always explain everything, and Jamal, pressing gently yet relentlessly, followed up with a printout from the center's minutes he had dug up from archived emails. "According to this log, which I got from the public records request I filed, with Mr. Jenkins's help, you were the one who handled the petty cash drawer on the days the discrepancies occurred. Can you explain why your initials are on these withdrawal slips? Instead of Grandpa's, the courtroom stirring as Carla shifted uncomfortably, her testimony crumbling under the weight of overlooked details that Vasquez had never bothered to scrutinize. The prosecutor's face, flushing with frustration, as she objected again on grounds of relevance. But the judge allowed it, sensing the unraveling of what had seemed an airtight accusation. And as Jamal transitioned to dissecting the financial ledgers, his mind racing through the strategic playbook Mr. Jenkins had drilled into him during those evening sessions where they role-played courtroom scenarios using real case files from Harold's old practice, emphasizing how to expose biases without aggression. Attack the facts, not the person, Jamal. Let the truth do the fighting. Words that guided him now as he highlighted inconsistencies in the audit report. Look here, Your Honor. The prosecution claims $8,000 went missing for program supplies, but I contacted the listed vendor and they have no record of any order from the center. In fact, their address leads to an empty lot I visited last week with Mr. Jenkins, pulling out photos he had taken on a disposable camera to document the site. The jury leaning forward in unison, one member, a young father, nodding subtly as if connecting dots in his own experiences with bureaucratic oversights, while Vasquez countered by calling her expert witness, a forensic accountant named Dr. Leonard Price, who took the stand with an air of superiority, testifying that the patterns clearly point to internal theft by the fund manager. But Jamal, undaunted, requested permission to question him, and upon the judge's nod, asked Dr. Price, in your report, you analyzed only the outgoing transfers. Did you verify the incoming donations, like the $10,000 grant from the city that was rerouted without Grandpa's knowledge? The expert faltering as Jamal presented a grant approval letter he had obtained through a Freedom of Information request, learned from Harold's tutorials on public records access, revealing that the funds had been diverted by an external hacker trace, that the prosecution ignored, the emotional stakes heightening as Elijah clutched his chest during a heated exchange, prompting a brief recess where Jamal rushed to his side, whispering, "Hang on, Grandpa, we're almost there." The doctor said, "Your heart can't take more stress, but truth will heal it." Drawing from memories of Elijah's hospital visits, where Jamal had sat by the bed, reading legal precedents aloud to distract from the beeping machines. Their bond deepened by shared adversity. Since the fire that scarred Jamal's arms with faint burns, he hid under long sleeves, symbols of survival that fueled his resolve, and upon resuming, Jamal unveiled a timeline chart he had crafted with colored markers, each point backed by timestamps from emails and logs systematically poking holes in Vasquez's narrative. If Grandpa was stealing, why did he report the missing funds himself to the board 3 days before the audit? The question exposing a motive gap that the prosecutor scrambled to fill with accusations of cover-up. But Jamal parried with witness statements from center volunteers. He had interviewed door-to-door their affidavits, notarized by Mr. Jenkins, painting Elijah as a vigilant guardian who had suspected foul play from outsiders, eyeing the center's property for redevelopment. The tension mounting as Vasquez grilled Jamal on the stand during her turn. How does an 8-year-old afford to investigate like this? Admit it, your grandfather coached you to lie. Her tone laced with implication that poverty equated to dishonesty. But Jamal responded calmly, "Ma'am, The library is free, and kindness from people like Mr. Jenkins costs nothing but time. Grandpa taught me integrity, not lies. His poise earning admiring glances from the jury, one woman dabbing her eyes at the boy's vulnerability, masked by strength. And as the session wore on, Harold Jenkins himself appeared at the courtroom doors, having been summoned by a text from Jamal during recess, the retired attorney striding in with a briefcase of supplemental files from his pro bono network, ready to bolster the defense with expert testimony on procedural lapses. The chapter building to a pivotal moment where Jamal revealed a crucial email chain hacked from a dummy account ethically obtained through a tip from a sympathetic IT volunteer at the center, showing communications between an unknown party and a city official about redirecting funds to speed up eviction notices, the revelation sending Vasquez into a flurry of objections, the judge calling for order as the unraveling accelerated Jamal's strategic mind. Honed through mock trials, where Harold had played devil's advocate, proving unbreakable. The psychological battle intensifying with Vasquez's veiled threats of perjury charges against a minor, but Jamal standing firm, his scars from the fire, a metaphor for inner resilience. The courtroom, a cauldron of shifting allegiances as jurors whispered among themselves, the prosecutor's facade cracking under the weight of neglected truths. And as the day drew to a close with the judge adjourning for further review, Jamal's efforts had transformed skepticism into budding belief, setting the stage for the final exposures. Without revisiting the initial shock, the unraveling not just of accusations, but of a system that had failed to see beyond surface assumptions, Jamal's journey from orphaned survivor to courtroom warrior, a testament to mentorship's power and the unyielding pursuit of justice. With the weight of revelations hanging heavy in the Chicago courtroom, like an unspoken verdict waiting to be delivered, prosecutor Elena Vasquez's final desperate gambit crumbled under the scrutiny of her own exposed flaws. Her attempts to discredit Jamal as a manipulated child, backfiring spectacularly when the judge ordered an immediate review of the presented audio recordings surreptitiously obtained from a whistleblower tip line that Mr. Harold Jenkins had connected Jamal to through his network of reformed informants. The tapes capturing Vasquez in hushed conversations with city developers, admitting to pressuring the audit to clear the path for new investments. In the community center's land, her voice on the playback cold and calculating as she dismissed Elijah's innocence with a laugh. The old man's a perfect scapegoat, keeps the real players out of the spotlight. The jury's collective gasp echoing through the chamber as faces hardened in disgust. One juror, a retired teacher, openly shaking her head, while another, a construction worker, clenched his fists at the betrayal of public trust. And Judge Amelia Hargrove, her gavel slamming down to restore order amid the uproar, declared a mistrial on the spot for prosecutorial misconduct, ordering Vasquez's immediate suspension and referral to the state bar for ethics violations. Her ruling delivered with a thunderous finality that sent shockwaves beyond the courtroom walls. Elijah Thompson collapsing into his chair with sobs of relief as Jamal rushed to embrace him, the boy's small arms wrapping around his grandfather's trembling frame, whispering, "We did it. Grandpa, the truth won, just like you said it would." Their victory, not merely personal, but a seismic shift that exposed the rot of corruption, tying real estate greed to judicial oversight. Vasquez escorted out in handcuffs by marshals as reporters swarmed the halls. Her career in ruins, while Elijah's name was cleared instantaneously. The charges dismissed with prejudice and an official apology from the district attorney's office forthcoming, but the true triumph unfolded in the weeks that followed as the case ignited a firestorm of media attention. Jamal's story splashed across national headlines as "the kid who cracked the court," inspiring a wave of reforms dubbed the Thompson Mandate in Illinois legislation, mandating independent audits for community funds and requiring body cameras for all prosecutorial interviews to prevent coerced testimonies, the bill passing unanimously in the state Senate with endorsements from civil rights groups who hailed Jamal as a beacon for underrepresented voices. And in the flash forward to 6 months later, Jamal stood at a podium in a bustling auditorium at the University of Chicago's law school, no longer the timid orphan, but a confident 9-year-old advocate dressed in a crisp blazer donated by a local firm, delivering a keynote on youth empowerment to an audience of aspiring lawyers and activists, his words flowing with a poise honed through post-trial interviews where he emphasized, "Justice isn't about age or who you know, it's about asking the right questions and never stopping until the answers make sense." The crowd erupting in applause as Elijah watched from the front row, his health restored through community-funded treatments that poured in after the trial. The center not only saved but expanded with grants from philanthropists moved by their saga, now offering legal literacy workshops for kids modeled on Jamal's experiences, where he personally led sessions on basic rights, teaching peers how to spot unfairness in everyday systems like school disciplinary hearings or housing disputes. His club, Young Defenders, growing to over 200 members across city schools. Each session ending with role plays that mirrored his courtroom battles, but focused on real-world applications like advocating for better playground safety or challenging biased grading. Elijah contributing by sharing tales of his own youth in the civil rights era, reminding the children that change starts with one voice, but echoes through many, their family, healing deepened through these efforts. Jamal's burn scars from the fire now worn as badges of survival during motivational talks, where he connected personal pain to broader fights against inequality, and as Vasquez faced her own trial for fraud and obstruction, disbarred and sentenced to community service, in the very neighborhoods she had undermined, her private remorse surfacing in leaked letters, where she admitted, "I let ambition blind me to the human cost." But Jamal, ever compassionate, responded publicly with forgiveness. Everyone deserves a second chance. If they learn from their mistakes, the law taught me that, his magnanimity earning him awards from the NAACP and invitations to testify before Congress on juvenile involvement in legal proceedings. The Jamal Act, federally proposed to allow minors supervised access to represent family in non-criminal cases, sparking nationwide debates on child agency and protection, and in quieter moments, back at the revamped community center, now bearing a plaque honoring Elijah's legacy, Jamal reflected on the journey during family dinners, where Elijah cooked his famous gumbo, the aromas filling their modest home as they discussed future dreams. Jamal eyeing a path in public defense inspired by Harold Jenkins, who had become a surrogate uncle offering pro bono guidance on advanced case studies, the mentor's own history of overcoming racial barriers in the 1960s, fueling their bond. "You didn't just win a case, kid. You rewrote the rules," Harold often said. And as Jamal launched an online platform for kids to share stories of injustice, anonymously amassing thousands of submissions that led to local investigations, his influence rippled outward, empowering a generation to view the law not as an enemy, but a tool for equity community leaders, crediting him with revitalizing trust in institutions. Elijah's Center becoming a hub for intergenerational dialogue, where elders shared oral histories of resistance and youth, brainstormed modern solutions, the transformation complete as Jamal, on his 9th birthday, received a scholarship fund from anonymous donors touched by his story. Ensuring his education through law school, his final reflection in a journal entry, capturing the essence, The fire took my parents, but it lit a spark in me. Grandpa fanned it into a flame, and now it's a fire that warms everyone around. The saga's legacy, enduring through policy shifts, personal growth, and communal healing, proving that one boy's stand could ignite widespread change without echoing the courtroom's earlier dramas, instead weaving new threads of hope and action into the fabric of society.